During this pandemic, the Lebanon 912 Project has been unable to gather each month and meet with our members to explore critical issues and topics related to the principles of life, liberty, and property. I truly wish I could be making this presentation to you in person, and I hope, once we can meet in public again, I find you all safe and ready to launch again with a renewed spirit in support of the 12 principles and 9 values that created the Lebanon 912 Project. I decided to record this message because it's probably easier for many of you to watch a video than it is to read these remarks, which can often be a little lengthy. I'll also be reading these comments so I don't get off the page and make this video longer than it already has to be. To those who regularly attend our meetings, I know you already understand that. So to paraphrase Bette Davis, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Now, before I get to the point of the presentation of the following chair remarks to the Lebanon 912 Project, today is Memorial Day, and we should take a moment to honor those who have fallen, offering up the greatest sacrifice in service to their country. From the American Revolution until this moment in time, brave men and women have made that sacrifice to defend this country and the principles for which it stands. To each and every one of you, we say thank you. Now, what would the Lebanon 912 Project chair remarks be without some reference to the voices of our founding fathers? Well, here it is. This is from Thomas Paine's American Crisis. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its good, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. And now to further paraphrase Mr. Paine, our governor declared that he has a right to bind us all, in all cases whatsoever, and if being bound in that manner is not slavery, then is there not such a thing as slavery upon earth? Even the expression is impious, for so limited a power can belong only to God. Now here we are in this not-so-grand experiment of the governor's declared state of emergency. A state of emergency that's supposed to end in 10 days. Well, the General Assembly can vote to end this state of emergency now. As long as this pandemic continues, there is nothing in this current law that can stop the governor from redeclaring another state of emergency. If the General Assembly fails to end the declaration, the governor can simply, at the end of 90 days, redeclare to continue this state of emergency. In fact, according to a recent news report, Wolf has stated he plans to renew the declaration of the state of emergency. This should come as no surprise to any of us. We are now on day 80 of absolute rule by one person where, through this governor's declaration, he has essentially rendered the General Assembly virtually impotent when it comes to lawmaking authority. Those we elected to represent us have been replaced by orders coming from individuals who have been appointed to those positions by the governor. In other words, they owe their job to this governor. The largest presence that we've seen of that enforcement during the daily briefings come out of the Department of Health, who, in my opinion, has demonstrated incompetence and neglect in the service and execution of their duties. Having removed their own mother from a care facility before forcing nursing homes to readmit COVID-19 patients to those homes, while deliberately not notifying the public of those intentions so that they could do the same if they could afford to do so, contributed to the deaths of nearly 3,000 victims of COVID-19 in our assisted care and nursing homes, while establishing a program to oversee the health and safety in those same homes. The Department of Health, under the direction of Rachel Levine, failed to implement those safety procedures, placing the most susceptible and vulnerable in this disease at even greater risk, further contributing to those deaths. Couple this to the dramatic rise in overdoses, suicides, and attempted suicides, and domestic violence. No one really knows what long-term impacts this is going to have on our children. Yet we still keep hearing that this is all about our health and our safety. Tell that to the families whose loved ones died alone without family visitation or the comfort of closure and funeral services for those loved ones, especially to those family members who died as a direct result of the failed policy related to our nursing homes and assisted care facilities. A recently published chart coming out of the governor has a myriad of contact numbers for people who are experiencing depression, mental stress, and health issues. And it is an absolute joke to anybody who understands what really happens to the thought processes in people when they become mentally overwhelmed. What about all those with limited access to the internet? Where are they supposed to go to get this information? You know, in just 80 days, we have seen the loss of 1/3 of our labor force. There are reports of a loss of $1 billion in revenue to PennDOT, $1 billion in lost revenue to our local school districts, and another projected $6 billion in lost revenue through PIT and SUT. And those are just the losses that have been reported so far, the losses I've been able to obtain. As these restrictions continue, we could rapidly see numbers reaching $10 billion in budget shortfalls or more that will drastically impact programs that have been established to meet the needs of seniors and others in society, including necessary financial resources to deal with the growing needs of mental health issues in the state, and yet these restrictions linger on and on. And let's not forget, this is going to generate revenue loss at the county and municipal levels as well. For those of you who are expecting the federal government to jump in and bail out the states, counties, and municipalities, as well as our school districts, remember this: the government has no money that they haven't taken from you, the taxpayers. And if they keep printing money, this negatively impacts the value of your dollar, driving up other cost factors while lowering your wage value. For schools, counties, and municipalities, they're going to have to decide between raising property taxes, which in turn would lower your home value, or cutting staff, wages, programs, and/or services. You know, in just 80 days, we have endured a complete lack of transparency from this governor. We've seen conflicting information. We've seen erroneous numbers reported related to those inflicted and those dying from the virus. We've seen an unemployment office which could not handle the task of allowing for people to file claims in a timely fashion. We've seen a business waiver process that's been riddled with contradiction and questions, coupled to many other problems, all demonstrating an inability of this Pennsylvania executive administration's inability to justly and responsibly keep up with their own demands. And as we move forward, we see no actual detailed plan or time frame allowing for businesses or the people of this state to prepare to ever return to a normal life. The business community has no way of planning for a future where they can return to business as normal. And These businesses must continually wait for some announcement from the governor of some actions, often vaguely stated, that could change and often have changed with a moment's notice. In fact, they've coined a new term for this. They call this the new normal. Now, even if we choose to ignore the simple logic that something which is new can't possibly also be something that is normal, they never tell us what this new normal really means. They never tell us what life will be like under this new normal. But looking at the rhetoric, they are telling us that if this governor has any say, there will be no return to normal as long as it is possible for this governor to cling to his power. And judging from his actions, judging from his rhetoric, he intends to cling to that power for a very, very long time. After all, he's already talking about schools. Those schools which are still far beyond the 90 days of his declared emergency. And as we all anticipate and prepare to move to the green zones in Pennsylvania, each of us needs to be aware that green is not a return to normal. The governor has turned to childlike color phases of the familiar traffic light of red, yellow, and green. But remember, green in this case does not mean go. That's all part of a governor's intentional illusion, trying to fool the American people, or at least the people of Pennsylvania. Under the governor's own graphic describing the green phase, it actually states this: not a return to the way things were, but changing behavior for a new normal. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand what that really means. They are publicly admitting that this experiment is really just the implementation of the progressives' plan for social engineering the population of Pennsylvania. COVID-19 has become little more than an excuse for forcing us all to change the way we behave. And if we don't do so, we will suffer the consequences of enforcement that is going to come through created, not elected bodies within our government, all at the will of one person, the governor. And as long as we remain in this condition, our duly elected constitutional republic of elected representation is gone. Bars, they tell us, restaurants and other entertainment venues, nails, hair salons, barbershops, massage therapists, gyms, indoor recreation, health and wellness facilities, they tell us they can open, but they can only open at 50% capacity, coupled to strict social distancing requirements. Businesses previously allowed to open during the yellow phase at 50% can now go to 75% capacity with those same strict social distancing requirements. Remember, this easing of restrictions, it's not going to stop the bleeding. We are still going to see business closures continue. When we take the time to add costs related to the social distancing and sanitizing, these places who are going to see a mandatory 50% loss of clientele, or even just a 25% loss, will not be sustainable for many of our smaller businesses. In the end, that's going to generate more loss of revenue, even though these smaller businesses are already experiencing a heavy burden of taxation that's already in place on those businesses. Since many of these small businesses operate in our third-class cities, have we even stopped to consider the impact those closed storefronts will have in contributing to the loss of property tax revenue, which in turn will devalue neighboring properties? Have we ever stopped to consider that this is going to advance the problems of blight in our communities? In saying all of that, to the general public, I only ask this: I know we are all frustrated. In fact, if you're like me, you're probably angry. But remember, as our small business community slowly goes through these phases of reopening, the limitations that's being placed on them is not their fault. Many of them are frustrated as well. Taking your frustrations out on the small business community is misdirected anger. They're simply trying to comply with confusing and often changing regulations and this confusing message that's coming out of this administration. And they're doing this so they can open their doors, provide jobs while providing a service to their communities and provide for their own families. After all, does any of us really understand what the reason is, or the law for that matter, concerning masks? That's not the small business community's fault. All of that is confusion that's being created by this administration. Throughout this entire process, the governor has refused to work with those we've elected to represent us, while establishing new offices filled with people he appoints. But apparently those appointments are only those of a like mind, those who are willing to do his bidding, as they act as enforcement agencies of policies and orders which have become law, but law without the consent of the only constitutionally authorized lawmaking body that is supposed to exist in government. In Pennsylvania, that's our General Assembly. Let me ask you this question. When the governor established his essential, non-essential business classifications, did he consult with that lawmaking authority? Did he consult with our General Assembly? Did he consult with our local elected representatives at the county or municipal levels? Did he consult with the business community at large? The answer to that question is no. No, he did not. In the implementation of his waiver system, did he once again turn to those same groups to make sure that the waiver system was going to be fair or just? No, he turned to the unelected Department of Community and Economic Development, assuming that a handful of staffers could responsibly make judgments in issuing these waivers. And as we have found, they did not. And as we try to get information, as we try to look behind that decision, we see a governor who has misrepresented and refuses to release the logic and reasoning behind those decisions. And now, under 80 days of this self-declared state of emergency, we still don't know the rationale behind any of these determinations, despite countless requests for information. As the governor implements his COVID-19 task force, do any of us know the criteria for appointment to such an unelected position that's going to have the power of this task force? Do we know who is actually serving on this task force, much less whether or not they're even qualified to make such determinations? Or more importantly, is anyone we've actually elected to represent us going to serve on this task force to provide some sort of overseeing check and balance to this whole process? Or is this just another group advancing the governor's personal agenda? Well, personally, I think I know the answer to that, and the answer is yes. As I personally look at how they handled the senior situation, the debacle related to the unemployment problems, the impact on the supply chain due to uninformed and failed policies, the number of times they've been caught manufacturing numbers, why would I trust anything this administration is planning on doing with this task force? Apparently, I'm not alone in my lack of distrust of this administration. While not a scientific poll, local news station ABC out of Harrisburg conducted a poll with the following results. Out of more than 28,000 votes at the time of this writing, 89% of those voting disapprove of how the governor has handled the COVID-19 issue. So you can ask yourself, how did we get here? Well, in 1978, our General Assembly passed a statute that is part of our consolidated statutes granting powers to a governor, vesting him with the sole authority to determine a statewide state of emergency. It did not allow for the General Assembly to be involved in that decision. It did not allow for our General Assembly to approve such a declaration or to oversee the implementation of that decree. That consolidated statute can be found in Chapter 73 of Title 35 of our consolidated statutes. It's not in our Constitution. It's in our consolidated statutes. As we have witnessed, this consolidated statute that allowed for these actions should clearly be seen as a seriously flawed statute that needs to be drastically changed in a way that restores checks and balances, constitutional checks and balances on the power and the authority of any governor during a state of emergency. That statute must draw a distinction between a natural emergency, flooding, earthquakes, hurricanes, that sort of thing, which would require immediate response and action from a governor. It must draw that distinction to separate them from actions taken during a long-term health crisis like this pandemic that must include decisions that are going to come from a variety of related sources, including our elected representatives at the state and local levels, not just appointed people who all owe their jobs to this governor and are acting at the whim and will of this governor. We need a government which will work with all the elected representatives of government, including those local representatives at the county, at the municipal levels, people who have more direct contact with the people in their districts, who better understand the needs, the health, and the safety of the people they've been elected to represent. What we don't need is one person making unilateral determinations for an entire state, arbitrarily determined, while refusing to interact with others whom we've elected, and clinging only to those whom that one person has appointed. No one person should have this much power for this long a period of time in making decisions that impact our health, safety, and jobs. No one person should ever have this power at all in matters concerning our life, our liberty, and our property. Before I close, I would like to extend my personal thanks to those Lebanon County officials, people we elected, who took a principled stand for the citizens of Lebanon County. Senator Dave Arnold, House Representatives Russ Diamond and Frank Ryan, County Commissioners Bill Ames and Bob Phillips, District Attorney Pierre Hess, and County Sheriff Bruce Klingler. I couldn't be prouder of the actions taken by these, our local elected representatives, during this very difficult time. Thank you for upholding your oath of office to our constitutions, both state and federal. And to the Friends of the Lebanon 912 Project, thank you. I hope you have a safe and happy Memorial Day. As you do, remember, to paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, the God who gave us life gave us liberty. But can the liberties of a people be secure when we have removed the conviction that these liberties are a gift of God? These liberties are not the permissions of a governor. Indeed, I tremble for my state when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of life that these people are to be free. Thank you.